Hello and welcome to Fact and Suspicion. I'm your host, Dan, here with my co host, Ben.
Hello.
And today we're doing something a little different. You may have seen our episode before where we talked about the Michael Peterson case, the murder of Kathleen Peterson. Well, there's a new mini
Otherwise known as The Staircase.
The Staircase, yeah. There's a new mini-series on HBO about it. We got 6 episodes out right now. And we're going to discuss that and how it sort of lines up with the facts of the case and the documentary. So,
and how it is just as an entertainment product.
yeah, as an intro, because I like it.
I do too.
I like it.
I think the obvious place to start is just how well Colin Firth did.
Colin Firth.
He nailed Michael Peterson.
Amazing.
His mannerisms, his speech patterns. I mean, he doesn't look like Michael particularly, but he speaks just like him. And Michael was obviously kind of in love with himself, and
Yeah.
Colin nails that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I'll be honest with you. Like, you watch the documentary, and I never thought that Michael Peterson was very likable.
No, not particularly.
And Colin Firth did a great job of not being likable.
He really did.
Yeah.
Now, the one difference, I think, and maybe this is stuff we just didn't see during the documentary because that's where we get most of our information.
Yeah.
Colin Firth's depiction seems a little angrier than I remember the Michael being in the documentary.
Well, that's true, but I think because in this, sometimes you're getting stuff that's behind the scenes that like wasn't necessarily in the documentary.
Right, that's probably the case.
Right, as far as the show goes. And but I mean, I cannot imagine how many hours Colin Firth had to spend
watching that documentary.
Yeah, just to get the mannerisms, the speech inflection.
He's got that whole like that stream of conscious style speaking that Michael has, where he kind of interrupts himself.
Right. Yeah.
He nailed it.
I'd say he's definitely has to get a Best Actor Emmy for what is it for in like a miniseries or whatever the category is.
I'd vote for him.
But I'm going to say something else though. Like Colin Firth was amazing, but I do not think he was the most impressive actor in the show.
Well, who do you think outdid him?
Parker Posey. She like basically became Freda Black.
Okay, she looked and sounded just like Freda. But I don't think she nailed the character quite as well as Colin Firth did Michael.
I think she did. She's just not on screen.
The resemblance is uncanny.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no, she even says the words. They sound just like when she was, doing her, I think it was a closing argument, and she was talking about the porn that was found on Michael's computer. And she calls it pure tea filth. She sounded just like Freda Black.
Yeah.
She looks like, has the facial expression. She moves around like her, like, I feel like she became Freda Black.
Yeah, you made me feel really old a minute ago because I didn't know, or had forgotten at least, that she was the same girl that played in
Dazed and Confused.
Dazed and Confused.
Yeah.
She was really hot back then, too.
Yeah. It
makes me feel like an old man, dude.
Dazed and Confused was 1993.
Don't say things like that, Daniel.
Oh.
I reject that.
All right. Whatever.
So where's the logical next step here?
Right. So let's talk about, we talked about the actors, right?
Well, we should probably, while we're on the actors, the subject of the actors, Sophie Turner, I thought she did a really good job, though I think that role was kind of surprising for me. Going from arguably the most popular television show of all time, because obviously she played Sansa Stark in Game of Thrones,
right,
to that small role. She does a good job in it, no issues with her acting, but it just seems kind of strange for her to play such a small role.
Well, maybe she just really liked the project.
Well, I do know, like from interviews, she's a big fan of true crime.
Yeah,
so if you're watching, Sophie, maybe give us a Twitter shout out.
Right. Well, for an actress of her age, if she wanted to be involved in this project, who else was she going to be?
Right. That's fair. That's fair.
Because I think she plays Margaret, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, even if she played Caitlin, who was Kathleen's daughter, like I still don't think that's a bigger role.
No, you're right.
Because of all of the children, I feel like she was the one that was in the documentary.
So when I said a bigger role, I just meant I'm surprised she took this project at all.
I mean, well, maybe she likes the project.
No, like I said, from interviews, we know that she's a fan of true crime, so that probably had something to do with it.
I like Sophie Turner a lot. I thought she was great in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, she was really good as Sansa.
Speaking of the actresses again, Toni Collette, I think, did an amazing job.
Which one was he?
No, Kathleen.
Kathleen.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah, Toni Collette. But the thing about it is we don't have anything to compare that to know like.
That actually comes to one of my biggest complaints of the show, and I don't have many because I actually think it was really entertaining.
Yeah.
The depiction of Kathleen, because I think one of the things that was really good about this show is it could finally put give a character to Kathleen instead of just this passive figure that she always was in the staircase, right?
Yeah.
You could actually see her, what she was like. And I don't think the depiction of her was particularly flattering most of the time. She seemed like an alcoholic. And
right. Well, see, I guess what they're trying to do is
Now, I'm not saying necessarily that's not accurate to reality. I don't know. But it did not seem particularly flattering at times.
Well, the way I took it is that during the entire time of the show where Kathleen was portrayed, is that she was going through like a dark period, like a down period, right? She should be dealing with depression. Like her job was rough on her. They're having money trouble. I don't know how accurate the whole thing with the bats was in the house, but just one bad thing after another kept happening to her. And I feel like they missed an opportunity to show her happy living her life instead of just showing all these terrible things that happened to her before she died.
But in that time period, it may just be possible that there just wasn't a lot good going on.
No, but now, I mean, they could have backdated it a little farther, though, and showed some different scenes.
Fair enough. Now, one thing I was curious about that you'd probably know better than me since you researched the episode on the staircase. She seemed kind of, the character of Kathleen in the show seems kind of bitter just because she's having to take care of Michael's kids a lot. Was that pretty accurate to reality? Were they constantly borrowing money from her?
Well, yeah, they did need a lot of money. They were having a lot of money trouble, and definitely Michael's two sons, Clayton and Todd, they needed money a lot.
Clayton was the fuck up, right? And Todd had a couple failed business ventures, correct?
Right. But like now during this is when Todd moves to Cabo and starts selling timeshares and real estate and stuff like that. So he becomes successful. Clayton was the one that had been in jail, and
he threatened to bomb a college.
He placed a bomb at Duke, but
right.
I don't know if it was a real bomb or if it's a fake bomb. I mean, you can't do it either way, right?
He says that it was fake. I think that's what he says in the show.
Right.
But they don't actually discuss, that's one of the things, they don't actually discuss this in the documentary. And this is one of the ways that the show was actually more accurate than the documentary.
Yeah, it was. We remember getting ahead of ourselves on that.
Probably.
Because I have other reasons I think that the show may be more accurate than the documentary. But as far as entertainment though goes, and like with the actors and stuff,
I thought it was a good show.
It was great. I think it starts a little slow.
The first episode's kind of rough. My initial impression of it was that, well, this is just going to be boring. But after the first episode, it really picks up. I think they tried to pack too much story into the first episode.
I think it would be more entertaining to someone who is not as familiar with the case.
Probably so.
Because like when you've seen the documentary, like you're seeing a lot of the same things in the show, which I'm not saying is a bad thing.
I mean, at times the show is just depicting the exact scenes from the documentary.
Yeah. No,
which is really good. Like a lot of the trial worked that way. Like line for line.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you can't say that the trial was from the documentary. I mean, it was the trial.
Right. I'm just saying that they depicted what was in the documentary pretty much accurately. The exact way the trial was.
Very accurate. Yeah,
and not just like the shots were the same too, because they looked like they were trying to mimic the documentary at times.
No, I definitely agree with that. But I do think it's probably more entertaining if you aren't that familiar with the case.
Probably so. I mean, we already know how it ends.
Yeah.
But
though, I mean, it was still entertaining. To me, or at least the 6 episodes we have.
There's one thing I could have lived without, and that is the multiple times we have to see Kathleen die a horrible, bloody death.
Oh my God! Yeah. Now, okay. So
because they basically go through every popular theory of the murder or the death.
Yeah. So the first time they show it, I think it was important to show how all that blood could have gotten there. That time, because the first time they show
she's falling and trying to stand back up.
She falls is like the theory the defense put forth that she'd fallen, hit her head, and then was trying to get back up, coughed, and got blood everywhere. I think that may have been important to show that one as to how all the blood could have gotten there. But after that, could we just showed her like the main instance of what happened to her, and then just
not see her dying horribly
with blood going everywhere? It was graphic, right? Like I'm trying to watch this documentary, like my 5-year-old comes in the room, I'm having to hide her face.
Yeah, it gets pretty rough at times, man.
But yeah, that got rough. Yeah, I will agree. Though, I don't think it was. I mean, I don't think it's not something that's going to ruin the miniseries.
No. I just thought maybe. Yeah. One less time that she dies a horrific death, maybe.
Yeah, well, I'll agree with you. I'll agree with you on that one.
But I get that they wanted to show every particular, every theory of the crime, because they show the fall theory, which was the defense. They show the bludgeon theory, which was the prosecution.
Well, it wasn't bludgeon. He strangled her and banged her head.
Right.
Which, you know what? I'm glad they did not show him killing her with that blowpoke, because we know
that's utter bullshit.
The blowpoke didn't happen, right? We know it wasn't the blowpoke.
The blowpoke is one of the worst cases of prosecutorial storytelling you will ever see. Like, it's just, they came up with this nice story and they were just going to create the evidence to make it. And when I say things like this, I want to be clear. I don't know if Michael Peterson's guilty.
No.
Like, I have, like, standing here today, having kept up with the case for years, watched the documentary, watched the show, I have no idea if Michael Peterson's guilty. Could go either way. But I do know that trial was a farce at times.
It was, especially the blowpoke. But I've got to say, like, as a prosecutor, it's stupid to say, you know what the murder weapon is when you don't know where that item is.
Well, so to be fair, you know, they kept using that deceptive language. The blowpoke, or something like it, right? It was like, blowpoke, or something like it. They really go hard on the blowpoke and then back it up just a little, or something similar. I mean, when you have Dwayne Deaver, who's willing to just do experiments until he finds a way to match roughly what was seen at the crime scene. I mean,
just to be clear, if you have not watched our episode about Michael Peterson, you should probably go check that out.
We're not like Peterson advocates, right? Neither of us know if he's guilty.
Yeah,
I think
we
Daniel,
don't.
You put it at what, like 30% that he?
I would say 30%.
And I think it might even be closer to 50 because I just don't know.
30 and 50.
He was
guilty, right?
He was the only other person there. There's no evidence there was an intruder. No. And I'll be honest, just intuitively, it seems unlikely to me, like just at a first glance, that you could get those wounds just falling down the stairs. Now, I know that there have been plenty of experts that said that you know, you could, but I'm just saying, just from a casual observation, I can understand why somebody would look at that and say, there's no way that happened from a fall.
No, I completely agree.
But at the same time, the wounds aren't consistent with being bludgeoned either.
No, they're not. They're not.
No skull fractures.
That's the crazy part of it, right? So, like, the evidence really doesn't support one way or the other. But
which means you acquit,
right? There was the prosecution was not able to prove it within a reasonable doubt.
Look, I to this day, like, looking at the evidence, I don't know how you could possibly come to the conclusion that the prosecution proved that case beyond a reasonable doubt. Like, if there's not reasonable doubt in that case, does it even exist?
The prosecution was able to bias the jury.
You're right. I mean, let's be honest. The stuff on his computer,
the homosexual porn, the gay porn,
and the Elizabeth Ratliff stuff from Germany.
Yeah, which was Elizabeth Ratliff was. You really should watch the other episode. But Elizabeth Ratliff was his neighbor in Germany who actually died when she fell down the stairs.
Well, she had the initial diagnosis was what
she had an aneurysm, and then she fell down the stairs, right? But
and they thought there was enough similarities at the time to bring it in. Now, even the judge who admitted it says today that it was probably improper to admit both the stuff on the computer as well as Germany. And I'll be honest, between the two, I think including the stuff from Germany was way more egregious. Now, right, I agree that the homosexual stuff could be prejudice to the jury, but I can also see, just strictly legally speaking, where that could go to motive, right?
It could go to motive. However, if I remember correctly, their warrant didn't include what was on the computer, so it's technically unconstitutional for them to take.
Okay, and I'll be honest, and maybe you disagree, I have never really bought Michael's sort of explanation that Kathleen knew.
Yeah, that's so weird. I mean,
because
okay,
he's asked specifically several times, and even in the show they depict it,
right?
And his answer's always strange when someone asks, "Well, did she know?" Yeah, she knew. Well, did y'all talk about it? No, we didn't have to.
Right.
Like, Michael, what the fuck do you mean by that, dude?
Exactly.
Like, you're sure she knew, but you never spoke about it.
I think maybe she had an idea, but if they didn't sit down and have a conversation, hi, my name's Michael, we're going to get married, and I'm still going to sleep with male prostitutes on occasion.
Right. That just seems.
I would say she didn't know.
Right, exactly. It just seems like this would have come up at some point. Like, hey, where you going, Michael? Oh, gonna go fuck a dude behind a dumpster,
right?
Or in a sauna.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like that might have come up at some point, right? Like, exactly. I've never bought his lame because it's not even a particularly good explanation, right? Because he doesn't explain anything.
It's not.
He says, yes, she knew. He's adamant about that, but he's strangely honest that they never actually discussed it.
It is crazy. Look, we're getting to now though how the accuracies of the miniseries, which I would argue in certain aspects it is more accurate than the documentary.
Well, it includes things that the documentary didn't include,
Right.
like we just discussed a minute ago, like the stuff from Duke, the bomb threat.
The bomb.
If I remember correctly, that's not even in the original documentary.
No, and I don't know if they excluded that just for Clayton's privacy or whatnot.
Right. And one thing that on the same topic that I think is really fascinating with the documentary, in the same way that it gave a character to Kathleen, right? So she's not just this vague thing in the background.
Right.
You also got to see behind the camera, right? The interactions between the documentarians and Michael, which I thought was really cool.
And it's important to the story as well because Michael had a relationship with Sophie Burnett.
Yeah.
Who was actually did the editing for the documentary.
Yeah. Now, look, we should probably mention that there's a rift currently between the original the documentary team, and the people who filmed the show, because they say that the depiction in the show, and I agree, the depiction in the show is clearly that relationship was going on, or that was a romantic relationship before the original Staircase documentary was finished.
Yes,
that is clearly what they're saying in the show.
Miniseries,
but it's important to say that Sophie Burnett, and Xavier
Jean-Xavier Delestrade.
Okay, they both say that relationship was well after the documentary.
Right. However,
they had written each other.
Yeah, and
which is, I think, where the confusion comes in.
Yes, but what I think is important to note here, though, is she did seem to develop feelings for Michael while she was watching the footage and doing the editing for the documentary, which you would think could create a bias.
Okay,
right?
I absolutely agree with you, right? There's no way to prevent that. If you're developing an emotional attachment to someone, it's going to affect you. But I still think she did a good job editing the film. I don't think there was anything she did that was particularly egregious. Now, do you know whether the core contention in the show, whether they're going to leave out the what was it? The discussion about
the cartilage in the neck.
The cartilage in the neck. Do you know if that's based on real events?
I honestly don't know,
because I looked for any interview that addressed that, but all I could find was the anger about the relationship.
Right. Now I did know about the cartilage in her neck, which is honestly that was the biggest piece of evidence really against Michael, because it seemed that she'd been strangled.
And I actually thought that the documentary handled it pretty well, ultimately, because I think. Now, whether their argument was, properly depicted what happened in reality, I don't know. But giving both the medical expert testimony and the rebuttal, I thought was the only fair way to do that, right?
No, I agree.
Because in the show, the producer, I don't remember his name.
I don't remember him.
He argues with John because he wants to stop it just at what's her name, the medical examiner.
She's slipping my mind right now. Not Ratliff.
Deborah Ratliff.
No, Ratliff. Ratliff was the lady that they accused of murder.
Radish. Deborah Radish.
Right, Deborah Radish, yeah.
Right, but he wanted to stop it right after Deborah Radish says that. But now in the show, it seems that he thought Michael was guilty.
It does definitely.
Now, do you know if that's accurate?
I have no clue if that's accurate or not. I couldn't find that information at all.
Because, I'll be honest, to the extent that I think that the documentarians showed any bias, I thought it was probably in favor of Michael. But I think that's also just a reasonable conclusion you can get because of all of the prosecutorial misconduct that took place.
And the fact, you got to look at the fact that they're following Michael and his family around the cameras.
Yeah, right.
So obviously it's going to create bias in that way. I would say if there is bias, the documentary does bias toward Michael. But I didn't come out of the documentary being like, "Oh, there's no way he killed her."
No, God, no. So I came out of that documentary having no idea what happened.
Exactly. There are some other things though about the miniseries. I think make it more accurate than the documentary. It touches on Clayton and Todd both dealing with alcoholism, which a lot of people said that's not important, but the fact that Clayton did find the blowpoke. I think it's important to talk about Clayton.
I agree.
Clayton and Todd, they both dealt with alcoholism a lot. Freda Black, one of the prosecuting attorneys, I don't know if she was dealing with alcoholism at the time, but if you'll remember, you saw her spiking her coffee at times in the miniseries. Well, Freda Black definitely was an alcoholic, at least later in life. She ended up with 2 DWIs, and she died from liver failure, and according to the autopsy, from chronic alcoholism.
Okay.
So
Did not know that, actually. I knew she had passed away, but I didn't know from what.
So I think it's important to call that into, with the prosecuting attorney, if she was, possibly drunk all the time, that's important to talk about.
Do you know if Clayton was the kind of screw up he's depicted as? Obviously that's a big screw up, right? The whole planting bombs thing, even if they were fake.
Right.
But did he have because in the show he's depicted as being really insecure about the way he screwed up and his place in the family. Was that?
That's hard to say because it wasn't in the documentary at all.
Yeah.
They
seem to leave out the children's lives quite a bit.
Yeah.
Maybe that was at Michael's request. I don't know.
Possibly, because they're not, whether he's guilty or not, they're not.
Right.
But I do know that he and Todd both dealt with alcoholism. And as you can see, if you were to look up Todd Peterson these days, he seems to still be dealing with it.
Those videos, he is the one that did those weird.
Yeah.
Is it TikTok videos or the YouTube videos?
There was a video that I don't know where he posted it. It's on YouTube, but it's not posted by Todd Peterson. Right. But it's obviously Todd Peterson, and he seems to be out of his mind talking about how he's sure that Michael killed Kathleen and Todd's mother,
Elizabeth Ratliff.
Patty.
Oh, Patty. Wait. He thinks he killed Patty?
Not really killed her. It's just that he says that he killed her by not calling 911 fast enough when she was having a heart attack.
When was that?
Just a few years ago. It hasn't been long since she died.
They got Patty pretty correct in the show too. She was kind of a weirdo in the documentaries.
She was eccentric.
I think eccentric's a good word.
Eccentric's a good word.
I can see where her and Michael would have gotten along well enough to get married.
Yeah, I can see
can see that they both have a strong preference for their own voice at times.
Yeah, right. Michael definitely does.
The way he speaks at times, he just seems like such a con man. I don't think there's any way to sugarcoat it.
Con man.
Does it not seem contrived, kind of put on the way he speaks at times?
I guess he could have also been a lit professor, right?
Right. But that's the thing. He's pompous like a lit professor.
Yeah, he really is.
There's a special kind of pompous that comes from being a lit professor,
and he's got it.
Well, I guess even the pompous way he smokes that pipe.
Yeah,
and Colin Firth nailed that. By the way,
he did. Colin Firth's such a good actor.
Oh, I didn't even know much he'd been in since this because I don't watch a lot of movies.
He got an Oscar for The King's Speech, so
I did see that actually. Yeah. That's one of the few movies that you've ever mentioned that I have seen.
Yeah, and then obviously he was in the BBC miniseries of Pride and Prejudice. That's how he got super famous.
Did not see that.
Played Mr. Darcy.
Did he?
Yeah, famously played Mr. Darcy.
Okay. So. Well, clearly, there's no telling how much time he spent watching Michael Peterson to do that job.
God.
I wonder if after the show he's had trouble dropping that speech pattern.
I don't know. I hope he's gotten rid of it, but
it's obnoxious.
It is, right? I hope he's back to his regular British.
But that's one of the things, I don't know if most people got this from watching the documentary, but I always thought Michael was just really unlikable.
I agree with that. I agree. And I think that's part of the problem, with him getting an unfair trial, is that people just didn't like Michael to start with, right?
Now, do we know, because in the show, now I know that there's always been at least some talk that the prosecutor had it out for Michael beforehand because of some articles he'd written. He'd been critical of the police and of the DA. Specifically, one of the articles he wrote, didn't he talk about bingo dens that were being broken up?
Yeah,
bingo halls.
Yeah.
When they should have been tackling real criminals. Mm-hmm. Now, in the show, there's a scene where Michael's at the gym and Jim Harden is also there, and they have a little verbal back and forth. And this is before. This is in one of the scenes depicting before Kathleen was dead.
Right, yeah.
And there's already some animosity there. Do we know how accurate that is?
I mean, obviously, I don't think that scene really happened. Right.
I
think that was just to portray.
But I'm just curious if it's portraying something that was genuine.
Yes, I don't know if they ever had any altercations in person over it. Mm-hmm. But I know, I would call some of the articles he wrote about Harden scathing.
Were they?
I would say that.
Wait, but were they about Harden or were they about Nifong?
They were Harden.
Okay.
They were Harden being the DA. Now, they may have mentioned Nifong as well. Now, Mike Nifong,
He's the infamous DA that got disbarred from the Duke Lacrosse.
Duke Lacrosse. And we didn't really talk about him much in our other episode, but he was on the prosecution team.
Oh, I've been saying I'm going to do a Duke Lacrosse episode for like a year now, so I probably should get on that.
At any rate, Nifong withheld exculpatory evidence, but that happened after Kathleen Peterson. So.
Like, here's how bad it was with Nifong. He got disbarred. And if you've heard us talk about these cases of all of the egregious things prosecutors have done and gotten nothing, like not even a slap on the wrist, imagine how bad you have to fuck up
to get disbarred.
Yeah,
it was rough.
Like, not just step down, not get hurt politically, but actually lose your license to practice law.
Well, I guess we should consider too that he was withholding exculpatory evidence on a bunch of rich kids.
Well, he got caught doing it.
Yes, but I mean, it was a bunch of rich kids too, which means they're going to throw the book at you.
Right. No, I don't think that's particularly fair, considering those same rich kids were the ones being railroaded.
No, I get you, right? It's just, what I'm trying to say is I think it'll make his punishment a little harsher.
Yeah, fair.
You know, because like you have these rich parents that are like, you know, we gave a lot of money to Duke, and, you know, Duke's kind of basically the economy of Durham.
Right.
So... But let's talk about, and I don't think there's as much on this topic, but let's talk about some things we could say are inconsistent with the miniseries.
Okay.
At least. I'm not sure how much I like, we talked about it already, but the depictions of Kathleen's death, right? Because that is just pure speculation.
Oh, it is. Now, to be fair to them, they did show at least so far, they've shown all three of the common speculations.
Right.
The fall, which was the defense theory,
the murder,
which is the prosecution theory, and they even showed the owl theory.
The owl, which is a big
Fred,
Larry Pollard. The neighbor Larry Pollard came up with that. It's a good theory. It really does cover all the bases.
And there was that. And to be fair, there was a feather.
Yeah.
Now, do we know whether that feather was an owl?
There was an owl. I know one of them was an owl feather.
Okay.
Like I've read that in several articles. So.
I'll be honest, it's kind of convincing. Again, it's one of those things that it's kind of a post hoc explanation because we already have the evidence and we can see what matches it.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say, but it's at least as plausible and probably more plausible than the blowpoke, right?
I said it in our first episode on this case, and I'm going to say it again. Of all my like crazy out there theories on every case, that is my favorite one.
The blowpoke?
The owl. The owl.
Yeah.
Like as far as being possible.
No,
right?
but I think it's actually more plausible than the blowpoke.
No, I agree, because obviously it wasn't the blowpoke.
Because the blowpoke, if you remember, Candace Zamperini was the one who brought that to the prosecution, right? She's the one who decided that was the murder weapon. And hell, like I said, the prosecution had Dwayne Deaver, which is another good thing the show does. Because I think that's one of the important things about both the documentary and the show is it exposes a lot of the shenanigans that can take place concerning scientific evidence in court cases.
Right.
When you have absolute frauds like Dwayne Deaver, you can make any evidence fit.
Really? Yeah. Now, as far as Deaver goes, with the documentary, he wasn't really exposed until the documentary in the later years, where we actually find out about Deaver.
But both of them depict, like this was later after the staircase, that because they added on to it later.
Yeah.
But they do show the hearings where the evidence against Deaver is presented. And they also show, both in the documentary and the show, how dumb Deaver looks at times on the stand. I'm shocked, even because the original jury didn't know that he was absolutely lying to them when he was. The evidence about that is overwhelming that he was absolutely lying on the stand.
Yes, not
not just misleading, outright lying. He withheld exculpatory evidence, but even without that, right? Because the jury had no idea, obviously. But to me, he came off as just so dumb on the stand. I'm shocked that so many of them found him that convincing, because he really was like some of the jurors that have been polled since cite him as the primary reason they convicted Michael.
Well, I mean, he worked for the State Bureau of Investigation. You'd think he's got some credentials, right?
Right. And that's how he was able to convince them, right? Just and honestly, even his credentials were wrong, because he claimed that he'd worked on, 17 cases, he said on stand, that involved the fall. And when they went back through his cases, he had never...
Case.
Oh, was it the two? Okay.
Yeah. His second case dealing with any kind of blood spatter, I think. So, yeah.
But I'm glad they included that because it's just a good insight into the American justice system at times.
No, I completely agree.
Which is deeply flawed, in certain aspects.
It is. Though, right, but as far as being questionable though, I think that just some of the we're talking about the theories of the death. I think it's just so. I'm not saying it's contrived, but it's all speculation, right?
Right.
So I'm not saying that's bad as far as the miniseries goes. I'm just saying it makes it a little less accurate.
Well, yeah, I can see that, but it is common speculation, and they're not. And clearly, even in the show, they're not saying this is what happened because they show it 3 separate times happening in 3 completely different ways. So they're just letting this is how people say it happened, and then just showing it. I think that's fair.
Here's another strange thing I think they included in that was if you'll remember, they found in Michael and Kathleen's bedroom a condom, an open condom, in the bedroom.
Now I didn't remember that.
They're trying to cite that as evidence. However, there was no genetic material. There was no semen in the condom. It didn't appear to have been used. It was just opened.
Now that condom, was that the same one that in the show that Clayton supposedly left when he was?
Yeah, that's it. So there's a scene in the show where Clayton wakes up next to this girl after they have a Thanksgiving party at the house while Michael and Kathleen are gone. And the girl's like, "Oh, don't worry, we didn't do anything." But there's a condom laying on the bed between them, where they obviously opened it.
He knocks it off
knocks it off. It falls under the bed, so they would have never found it, and that condom would have still been laying around. And that's an explanation. And that just seems really like they're saying, "Oh, this could have been how that kind of thing happened," but there's no basis that's where it came from. And I feel like that was a little contrived.
Okay, so I agree because I didn't know that there was any sort of issue with the condom, so I didn't really know what that scene meant, and if that's what they're trying to imply, because that's not one of those scenarios where they showed multiple ways it could have happened. That's kind of presenting that as what took place.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. And as far as all the things that happen in that show before Kathleen's death, most of that's just sort of like a storyline that's been put together. Right? It's not really factual.
Right.
I'm not saying some of those things didn't happen, but it's mostly just for benefit of making a narrative.
Now, how well did you think that they portrayed Caitlin, Candace, and Lori? Is she the other one? The 2 sisters and the niece?
Yeah.
Or the daughter, rather. I'm sorry.
Daughter, yeah. So I think
Caitlin, they seem to do a pretty good job with.
Caitlin, really good. I think she's pretty accurate, and I think it's a good way of portraying how she was with the family at first, and then her mind got changed.
Right. Which, to be clear, look, I understand their grief and why they think Michael's guilty, but Jim Harden relied on some of Deaver's evidence to convince them that Michael had murdered her mother and her sisters.
Now Lori, as far as I'm concerned,
she's barely in the show.
And she was never as big a player as Candace, right?
If anything, the show was actually portrayed Candace in a better light than she comes off in the documentary.
All right, so let's talk about Candace for a second, though. Because when you see Candace in the documentary, it's after her sisters died.
Right. No, I agree completely. She has every right to be upset. I get it. She's grieving. She's emotional. Well, but she's also absolutely unhinged at times.
Right. But that's...
And they dial that, because she's at 11 at times in the documentary, and they dial her back down to like a 5, solid 5 in the show.
When you're seeing her, most of the time when you see her in the show, though, it's in those scenes before Kathleen died.
Right.
And as far as I'm concerned, though, how many times have we seen news coverage or documentary coverage of a parent or family member after someone's died?
Right.
They always come across as unhinged because they're going through something terrible.
No, I agree. Like I said, it's understandable.
And I feel like possibly because
which is why I think they kind of did her a favor in the show.
Yeah, I'm not trying to crack down on Candace and say, "Oh, you're a terrible person," because I understand why she feels the way she feels. I just feel like she's been through a lot, emotionally, and she's probably suffering maybe some PTSD or something like that at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
Because when something like that happens to your sister, you see the images and stuff of the blood everywhere, of her body laying there. You see the images of the lacerations on her skull. It looks like she's been through something terrible. Which I'm not saying she did go through something terrible, no matter which one happened.
Right.
Which theory. But it just looks insane. So can you imagine that's hard for someone to digest about that happened to their sister. So and if you'll watch the footage of her speaking at the Alfred Alfred
Wow.
plea hearing.
She is not a big fan of.
No, and she
What's his
seems-
name? David Rudolph.
David Rudolph. Yeah, and she
spent like 3 minutes just lambasting him.
yeah.
Yeah, she
and-
comes off as really unhinged in that.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know if I agree with her being able to speak at the Alfred plea hearing, but that's probably not an issue for this.
I tend to agree.
Yeah.
I don't know why you would give her a platform there. I mean, because they're there because of all the issues with the state's evidence.
Yeah, right.
And she's allowed to stand up and say that he clearly did it and the evidence is overwhelming.
Right, exactly. And it's not a hearing about, if he is reformed and should be released on parole or something. Right. This is a hearing about the state really had no evidence and it's probably unconstitutional that the trial went forward, stuff like that, right?
I think I'm also glad that just on some of the introducing people to some of the aspects of the justice system they may not be familiar with. Mm-hmm. I think anytime people can learn about the Alfred plea, it's a good thing.
Yeah, like we were discussing this earlier. I think we're going to do an episode just about Alfred pleas.
That's a really good idea.
They work because they're very interesting. They've been used in several cases.
Because practically all it is the state saying we fucked up, but we don't want to be sued.
Yeah, that's it. That's the one.
That's it. You're pleading guilty just because we don't want you to take us for millions of dollars because we ruined your life based on false evidence and unconstitutional actions.
Right. Now, there was one more thing in this documentary that I'm not going to call it questionable. I think it's fine for narrative sake, but I actually saw a quote from David Rudolph where he said, this was absolutely false. And that's when you see the grand jury hearing in the miniseries. It shows that Rudolph was present during that.
Oh, right. Yeah, I thought that was weird.
Yeah, defense attorneys are not allowed to be at grand jury hearings.
They probably should be, but that's a different conversation altogether
as well. But I just
our grand jury system is so stupid.
Entertaining. It was false, but I think it was fine for narrative standpoint. Right?
I mean, there's a reason that that old saying "you can indict a ham sandwich" is true. I mean, when you give one person who is convinced that they're guilty a platform just to tell random people without any rebuttal whatsoever. Right. I mean, what do you expect them to do? Exactly. Yeah, I think there's enough evidence here because it was the only evidence you got to see.
Well, yeah, and there's no, I mean, you could basically lie at a grand jury hearing. There's no repercussion for that.
Who's going to stop you?
Exactly. So.
Not that any prosecutors would do that, Daniel.
Don't get me started right now on prosecutors. All right, so all in all, I think it's a good show.
Would you recommend it?
I would recommend, yes. After watching the first episode, I may not have, but going forward, I'd
I agree. Sure. Because, like I said, my initial impression was I was not especially impressed.
Slow starter.
But after that first kind of episode, because it's kind of plotting, they're trying to get a lot of information in there. Yeah. There's a lot to set up. I get it. But after that, it really picks up, and I definitely recommend it.
I would too.
Even if you've watched the documentary.
And we still have, there's still 2 episodes still to come out we haven't seen yet, so we'll see how those turn out.
I don't know where it's going to go from here.
Well, they're going to have the Alfred plea discussion.
Oh, that's one more thing we need. How accurate was that? Because I don't remember that. I don't remember Michael ever rejecting the Alfred plea, because that seems to be what he does at the end of...
No. If you go back to the documentary, he didn't reject the Alfred plea, but he kept talking beforehand to David Rudolph, saying that he did not want to say he was guilty.
He refused to get up in court and say he was guilty. But in the show, there's a scene right at the end of the most recent episode. I think it's at the end.
It is right at the end.
Okay, because they show him at the beginning too. What I wasn't sure about was whether Michael shuts the deal down, because that seems to be what happened.
I think it's just supposed to look that way, and it's supposed to create a bit of a cliffhanger for the next episode.
I mean, obviously, he's going to change his mind because we know he accepts it eventually.
But I think that's all it is. I think it's just supposed to create a cliffhanger. Then the next time I say you should, I'll accept it, whatever. I just don't want to say I'm guilty.
Yeah.
But I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, but all in all, I thought it was a good show.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to finish it.
Did HBO do the documentary as well?
No. Well, the documentary is actually done by Sky Atlantic.
Okay.
And then Netflix picked it up.
HBO did the Robin Hood Hill stuff, right?
They did, yeah. They did the West Memphis 3, the Paradise Lost.
Right.
However, now I say Sky Atlantic did that. The later episodes may have actually been done by Netflix. I'm not sure.
That is very possible. The newer ones.
I'm not positive, but they may have still been done by Sky Atlantic. But I know Netflix has basically purchased the rights for them in the U.S. because it appears as a Netflix original.
I might even go now. To be clear, I think that the Staircase documentary was one of the best true crime documentaries ever. I think it's right up there with Paradise Lost or Making a Murder. I think those are two other classics. But I might even go as far to say is if you're just trying to learn about the case quickly and you don't want to watch 13 episodes of a documentary, the show covers pretty much all the bases.
It really does.
I am shocked that you could learn so much about the case just from watching this show.
You could.
I'm not used to this kind of accuracy in a television show.
No, because the television shows, it's all dramatizations. And they take a whole lot of artistic liberties. But in this one,
well, I think Michael's behavior and his attitude helps there, right? Because he kind of is the drama.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You can be Michael and make a pretty interesting show just because of how strange of a man he is.
Yeah. Very strange and not super likable. Doesn't mean he's guilty, but
yeah. Again,
just because the trial wasn't fair doesn't mean he's innocent either.
No, it does not. I would not be willing to bet money one way or the other on Michael Peterson's guilt. And I have no clue.
That I think is what makes that documentary a great documentary. Because it is not so biased one way or the other that I could make my mind up.
Right. I think that's the mark of a good documentary. You watch it and you have no idea at the end. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. So yes.
Now, to be clear though, I don't think that it's anything the prosecution did that makes me wonder if he's guilty. It's just Michael's behavior himself.
Well, in most circumstances, it's a really strange circumstance. Like the prosecution did not put together good.
A lot of people have a hard time meshing those two beliefs that the trial was unfair, but the person may very well be guilty.
Right.
But I mean, it's just. One's procedural, one's factual, right? Well, I don't know if Michael did it. I do know that his trial was unfair.
To be completely honest, I think the prosecution was, in the long run, was at a disadvantage because of Deaver.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if they'd had a real analyst to tell them, this or this may have happened, they might have got a much better idea of what actually happened.
Maybe so.
But Deaver just set out to, take a theory of theirs and
but I don't think he was the only one, unfortunately. I think it's pretty clear that by the time the police arrived and got a good look at the scene, they had come to the conclusion pretty early that Michael was guilty.
Well, I mean, the scene was already, contaminated too. I mean, people have been in and out of there. It was just, they didn't shut it down for a few hours afterward, which is, not important as far as this episode goes, but that's just, that's what happened. Like, you didn't have good evidence in the case. The scene had been contaminated. Todd was walking all over the place. Michael's walking all over the place. Cops were walking all over the place. We even shut it down. The blood was tracked everywhere.
Yeah. One last question, is a quick one. Do you know if the sisters ever reconciled? If Caitlin and Margaret and I forget the other one's name?
I don't know. Honestly, that's probably handled in the more recent.
Well, I know in the documentary they kind of leave that open. Michael mentions that maybe at some point in the future they could reconnect. I don't know if
they actually have, and I think it'd be super hard to do that. Honestly, like when you've got that big of a division, I think this person killed my mother and you don't.
Maybe if Caitlin got away from Candace for a while, it'd be different.
It's hard to say. I mean, when you're set in your beliefs about that. I mean,
because Caitlin, even in the documentary, never seemed as convinced that Michael was guilty as Candace did.
No. I mean, no one was as convinced as Candace, though.
Except maybe Jim Harden.
I don't think Jim Harden was as convinced as Candace.
Probably true. Because he wasn't stupid.
No.
For all the man's faults, dumb ain't one of them.
No. Nifong was stupid.
Yes.
Freda Black was probably
But we will discuss Nifong more when I eventually get around to doing the Duke Lacrosse case.
Nifong was stupid. Freda Black was probably intoxicated. And Harden was just out to further his career.
Yeah. So all in all, it's a good show. And Colin Firth puts on a masterful performance, which I think is you can only genuinely appreciate it if you've watched the documentary. If you've seen Michael Peterson, heard him speak, then you can see
the mannerisms, the way he smokes the pipe.
It's so good. He nails it, just nails it. All right, well, we've been going just about 48 minutes, brother. I think that about wraps it up.
We need to wrap it up. This is longer than we meant for it to be. We hope you've enjoyed the episode.
It's kind of a more rambling, plotting episode, but I had a good time.
I had a good time, too. I think it's interesting. We'd love it if you could like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Please do that.
Subscribe to our podcast. Leave us a comment. Leave us a review.
But most importantly, tell a friend.
That's right.
Like, share our podcast.
We would love it if some more people would check us out.
Yep.
Thank you, guys. We will see you soon.
Take care.